Welcome to the Rooted Family Podcast, how to mindfully root ourselves and our families so that we can grow strong and aligned. Join me, Erin Sadler, as we discuss all things parenting, kids, health, wellness, and developing a roadmap for life that has you and your family thriving, not just surviving. I am a mom of 3. I'm a teacher with a master's degree in education, a health and wellness coach, a brain health coach, and a life coach. I love coaching kids and grown-ups on how to grow in mindful self-awareness to strengthen connections that support healthy brains. I have developed my own program called Grow Strong Roots, which teaches preschool through 5th grade students how to mindfully integrate academics with social-emotional skills, self-regulation, and brain-boosting values, including kindness, gratitude, creativity, resilience, courage, respect, responsibility, healthy eating, and healthy movement. I have found my purpose, and it is to help families, children, schools, and communities learn how to turn stress into success and plant seeds of love, peace, and happiness that will grow and blossom. Speaking, coaching, and teaching the Rooted Family Method for growing strong roots and seeing children and families transform when they understand these concepts is my passion. Because when we grow strong roots, we can withstand any storm life may throw at us. Hey everybody, it's Erin from the Rooted Family. If you're listening to me on 103.5, thank you. And if you're listening to me on the podcast, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, click like, leave me a comment. I want to hear what you're thinking about this podcast. I'm kind of new to it, so I want to hear all about it. Let me know what's working for you, what's not working for you, what you want to know more about. So hit me up with a couple comments. That would be great. I would really appreciate it. As far as what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about how mindfulness can make molehills out of mountains. Now, if you've ever heard the expression making mountains out of molehills, you know that it means something is basically making a way bigger deal out of something than it really is. And my guess is if that you are a parent, you are experiencing some tiny human in your life making big deals out of things that don't need to be big deals. Like, have you ever had a kid scream bloody murder about not having the crust properly cut off of their bread? Mountain out of molehill. Have you ever had a kid stop in the middle of a store, road, line, you name it, and fall to the ground because something small didn't go their way or because you forgot to bring XYZ? Mountain out of molehill. Have you ever watched your children argue to death about the most trivial information or toy? Mountain out of a molehill. Have you ever been in the car and thought you were going to lose your mind because the bickering had reached off the chain levels and they were bickering about nothing important? Yep, that's a mountain out of a molehill. If these sound like familiar scenarios, you have mountains out of a molehill syndrome infecting your house. And while it is part of experimenting with how to manage emotions, if it's left unchecked, repeating this pattern of behavior over and over and over again with every little flare-up, the child is reinforcing that this is how to deal with minor annoyances, and it becomes part of their personality. Because if you have heard me before on this podcast, you know that I say habits become behaviors, behaviors become personality, and personality becomes how you see the world. And we all know this grown up in our lives that every little thing is a trigger or an annoyance or ugh. And that's just not a way to go through life. To be annoyed all day long, number one, is not good for your body, and it's triggering that stress response all the time. But it just is not a happy way to move through life. So if you are experiencing this in your own life, or you're noticing this in your kids' lives, we're going to talk about how to keep molehills today. And if a brief fit about cutting crusts off is annoying, but not the end of the world, are you prepared to deal with that for the next 365 days? How about the next 657 days? That's how long the kiddo is in your house. And the bigger and older a kid gets, the less cute it gets. When they are really annoyed and they're little, It sometimes can appear to be cute, but as you get older, kids, it's really not that cute when they get annoyed over every single thing and blow it out of proportion. So, what's the anecdote? How do you keep those molehills, and mountains from getting too steep? What if I told you it was mindfulness? And what if I told you that there is a secret time to employ those mindful skills to get optimal results? And if you put these skills into play at the right time, you may be able to avoid a meltdown scenario altogether and train your child's brain to calm itself down. Now, if you've ever tried mindfulness before and it hasn't worked, or you don't see it making a huge difference, let's see if today's podcast can help you define and refine how to use mindfulness in your home and when to use it. Really, what I find with families is when they're trying to use it is probably at the least effective time for absorption, I guess I should say, through the child. So let's talk about when you should start to use those mindful elements, that breathing, the slow breathing, the calming mechanisms, using that treasure chest of tools that we have to help us calm down. Okay, let's talk about what mindfulness does to the brain. An active practice of mindfulness has been shown to do a myriad of things to help your brain calm down. If you don't know or mindfulness is new to you, a definition that I like is mindfulness is the ability to pay total attention to the present moment with non-judgmental awareness of the inner or outer experience. I'll say that one more time. The ability to pay total attention to the present moment with non-judgmental awareness of the inner or outer experience. And mindfulness practice can help in our brain reduce the emotional reactivity by increasing activity in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the front part of your brain, which is in charge of activities like decision making, planning, abstract thinking, regulating emotions. If your kid is learning and in school, they need prefrontal cortex skills. So that's why mindfulness, when I talk to schools and I talk to parents, combining mindfulness and the academics, to me, is a game changer because you're giving your kid the skill to have maximum absorption of information. When they have mindfulness skills, they're able to learn more, to learn better, to grow faster, to basically create the environment they need to soak up. If you're a tree, like the rooted family, it's those roots. You have the ability, because you have such a huge root system, and in our brains, that's our neural networks, to absorb the information and then be able to process that in the brain. Mindfulness is a huge helper in that area. If you don't have a strategy for managing your emotions, there is a high emotional arousal state and a low ability to manage it. Several studies indicate that mindfulness meditation and restorative breathing can increase prefrontal cortex function. Studies show that when mindfulness practice increased activities in the prefrontal cortex, it led to improved attention span. And as you know, we are currently living in a society that is crippled by the lack of the ability to pay attention. Everybody, kids, grown-ups, everybody. And did you know that in America, there's been a 42% increase in ADHD? The average cost of diagnosing and treating ADHD in children and adolescents is $14,576 a kid. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot. A 42% increase, that's amazing to me. We got to do something to counteract that. And if you have a kid in your home that's having a hard time focusing, a hard time managing emotions, a hard time with not being able to sit still and move around, and how do you use that energy productively, then really, really looking at mindfulness is so important. It's like working out. if you don't take the time to train brain muscles, then they're not as strong, they don't work as well, they're weak, and they limit how much you can do. The other thing studies show is that mindfulness increased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex. And that's a part of the brain that's closely connected with the prefrontal cortex and is correlated with empathy and decision making. As these regions show more activation, people tend to report greater emotional stability and less reactivity. So people are able to control how they want to respond instead of just reacting. Sound like something you would like your child to be able to do? I mean, we all would. If they took a breath and thought about how they wanted to react and respond instead of just flying off the handle, that's huge. Then we wouldn't have so many mountains and we'd have a lot more molehills. So the first tip to make it a regular part of your family's day is like brushing your teeth. Think of it as brushing your teeth. You would never let your kids go without brushing their teeth. So attaching breathing exercises or brief meditation to this part of your day may work for you. When you make it a consistent routine, then you don't get as much pushback from your kiddos in general. Like, I don't know, maybe your kids still super fight you on brushing your teeth. But at a certain point, usually kiddos are like, when you say go brush your teeth, they're like, all right, because they've just done it so many times. The same thing with breathing. If you get pushback when you ask your kids to practice breathing, tack it on to something that they're already doing as like a routine, and then it just becomes part of the routine. When you make it a consistent routine, you don't get as much pushback. Habits become behaviors. So practicing a habit will become part of who you are as a kiddo. So if you need help with breathing skills and you don't know how to do it at all, or you've tried it and it hasn't worked before for you and your family, or your kids are rolling their eyes at you, you may want to check out my online course, Book and Breathe. And I make breathing fun, which is amazing. And I make it engaging and I make it bonding for your family. So Book and Breathe, you just go to the Rooted Family Online and click on online learning, and that's where you can find that course. And it's just a multi-module course that you and your kiddos can do together. So my next tip is so number 1 is make it part of your regular day. And tip 2 is to practice during non-reactive times. Okay, so this is like ding, ding, ding. This is one of these things I see happening a lot, which is not helping the situation. When I said, like, when do you employ it to make it a molehill into a molehill and not a mountain, is to know when to start using those skills, those breathing skills, those mindfulness skills. Often I see parents trying to help their kid with mindful breathing only when it's a stress-filled time. That's like the fire department handing you a hose to put out a fire, but you never hooked it up to the hydrant. The hydrant hookup is the first step. Without it, even if you have the hose, the right tool, and it's useless because you haven't established the prior connection, the part that happens beforehand. So tip number 2 is practice when your kid is already in a calm state, which I know sounds like, if they're already calm, why do we need to practice mindfulness? Because we need to practice and get it wired into those neural networks in the brain. So when your kid does hit a point where they are having a reaction, that is the go-to because it's already been wired into the brain. That's why you have to practice during non-reactive times. Okay, tip number 3, tripping the trigger. No one starts climbing a mountain at the top. Just like your kid's emotional reaction didn't immediately show up. And I know sometimes it feels like that, but I guarantee you that there's some kind of triggering system that's going on in there. And just figuring it out, you can CSI this. And once you figure it out, you're like, oh man, all right, now I know what to do about it. So your child's emotional reaction had some lead up to it, even if it doesn't seem like it. It's kind of like a genie from a lamp. The genie can't come out of the lamp without somebody rubbing the lamp. The key to keeping molehills is to find out what's rubbing your kid's lamp the wrong way before the meltdown starts, and then starting the mindfulness at that point. that is where the mindful activity has the most effective power. So what I call the trigger point, when it first happens, or when you first notice a change in behavior, or you first notice that irritation or frustration, that's the point to start the mindful breathing. Not when it's full scale. By that time, you've lost them into an amygdala meltdown. So what you need to do is sort of do some detective work, kind of look at all the clues as to what exactly is tripping your child regularly. There's usually some regular ones, and then there's some, random ones that slip in there. But sort of starting to look for those things that are a trigger. It's also kind of like if somebody lights a bomb. The best time to deal with the bomb is not when it's exploding in your hand. The best time to stop a bomb from exploding is when the fuse is lit, but nothing so far has happened. And the earlier you recognize that bomb wick has been lit, the more time you have to put it out. This is where you need to employ your mindful skills. So you as a parent. So whenever I talk about mindfulness in kids, there's also usually the yin and yang is that the parents are also going to have to employ some mindful skills to help their child. So you have to be mindfully aware of what the triggers are and what lights the fuse for your child, so you can help teach them how to diffuse those feelings or respond differently, not react, so that they don't explode. My advice, if you are new to this or you're just guessing at what might be triggering the situation, is to keep a little field journal and look for patterns. Because while crustless sandwich meltdowns and refusing to get dressed in the morning seem unrelated, it could be the same trigger for both. Part of helping your kiddo through these is to gain some clarity of why they may be happening in the first place, and then talking to your kid about it. You can do this through observation, but I really, really feel it helps to also talk to your child about this, because what we observe and what's going on in your kid's brain, sometimes they're very similar and sometimes they're not. Ask them why they got so upset about the behavior and see what they say. Asking in the moment of the explosion may not work best, but during a calm point, making sure to follow up with your child regarding the behavior and asking your child what they could do next time to diffuse the situation helps first you understand, and it also raises your child's awareness that there needs to be some kind of level of change, which leads me to step 4. Look at the triggers and adjust. So, as you move through your day, noticing, taking your field notes, talking to your child about triggers, you may want to look at the physical needs of your kiddo when you see things start to happen. If we can rule out the physical, then we can move on to the emotional. But hunger, thirst, sleep. If those needs are not being met, that is a potential trigger waiting to turn a molehill into a mountain every single time. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Shelter and being fed and having enough sleep are of utmost importance. So sometimes those are very easy triggers to figure out right away. If your child always seems to explode right before lunch, you could move lunch back, or you could make sure there was a quiet transition time before lunch that could set the tone for a more calm, peaceful lunch. Or you could have a lunch checklist that you and your kiddo co-created to have a peaceful lunch. Maybe you take 3 deep breaths while you're washing your hands at the sink and saying things you're grateful for to regulate those emotions and set the tone for a lovely meal. These are not huge things, but they can have a huge impact on whether or not your child turns a molehill into a mountain. So if you've just done some calming breath, you've just set the tone, it's really peaceful, you've just said some gratitudes, that's a whole different mindset to walk into lunch in than if you just basically told your kid, or maybe not in the nicest tone, said like, it's time to eat lunch, get to the table, sit down, let's go. We got to go on to the next thing. That already makes you feel ramped up. Whereas if somebody's like, oh, we're going to have lunch in 5 minutes. Let me help you pick up. We're going to wash our hands and breathe. What kind of music would you listen to? What are you grateful for? That sets a much better tone for the lunchtime period than if they're just rushed into it. And like I said, if your kid's not having crestless meltdowns, or they're sitting at the table fine, or they're not demanding things from you, then that might not be a point that you need to focus on. But I'm just using it as an example in case something's not going your way. Kind of look at the pre and switch that. You notice I'm not so much focused on the actual lunch as I am to setting the tone before lunch. If raised emotion states are the norm during a certain part of your day, getting in the car, bedtime, getting ready to go, look at what's happening right before and see if you can adjust the before time with some mindfulness activity to help your kid keep a level of calm or move into a level of calm. So not looking, if they're always having a meltdown at the same time, look at the precursor of what's happening before. A little tweaking at the base of the mountain can help keep the mountain a molehill. The key time to employ mindfulness is at the trigger point, not at the meltdown. Also, teaching your kid to start using these skills before they get upset is the key to lifelong health and well-being. That leads us into step number 5. We're at 5 already. Be mindful to change the trigger because it'll change your life. Once I had a family, and I love this story, who came to me because their kiddo was having mountain upon mountain upon mountains of meltdowns, usually when they had to go somewhere or do something, and they were concerned that she had an anxiety disorder. And they were worried that being out in public or leaving the house was causing her such major anxiety because she would have such terrible meltdowns before they were trying to leave the house. She was having a major meltdown about even having to go outside and would often scream that she hated seeing other people and she just wanted to stay home. I witnessed one of these and it was epic. It was an epic meltdown and I could totally understand why the parents were worried. It was intense. But instead of looking at the meltdown behavior, the parents and I looked at what the circumstances before the meltdown happened, what was going on before the meltdown. We also started to employ the habit of breathing exercises in the morning and before bed, 2 times where it wasn't an issue, where it was that, back to the key point where you got to practice in the non-reactive times. Those were 2 of the times that it was non-reactive. Number 1, things I noticed, it did not seem to be related to a specific time, nor when I didn't think it was attached to like hunger. So we ruled all those out. In talking with her about how she was feeling about leaving the house, she said it made her feel sad and angry to leave the house. And she hated leaving and she didn't want to go. One key thing I noticed in speaking with her is that she didn't use the words worried or scared. Not that she had to do it for it to be an anxiety issue, but typically a kid who is frightened may say something like, I'm scared of the people, or I don't like the people outside. There was no mention of really the other people. She just said she was angry and sad when she had to leave. I also noticed that it was often only tied to unfamiliar situations or things she saw as chores or not exciting or having to go to the store. For instance, most of the time, if the parents were going to the park, she was more inclined to just move out of the house without a fit. Not all the time, though, but she was more. I noticed that in their desperation to not go in a 3-hour-long meltdown, which is totally understandable, for a run to Target, the parents often changed their plans and allowed her to stay home, which, I think we have all been there as parents. You're like, I just can't go through this again. However, from a parent battle standpoint, we were having the parents being held hostage in their own home by a meltdown, and nobody deserves to be held hostage by a meltdown. Not the kid, not the parents, not the general public, nobody. And the last thing I noticed was that they gave countdowns and warnings about leaving. Those were often ignored by her. She just kind of ignored them. Kind of like I always say, it's like the teacher from the Charlie Brown who's like, wah, 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 wah. That's what it seemed to be like to her. Like she wasn't even registering that they were telling her. So we decided to revamp the pre-leave scenario in hopes that diminishing trigger points or in dealing with them head on as triggers before they escalated, we could keep a molehill a molehill. So here's what we did. Number one, we came up with a leaving the house checklist that kiddo and parents co-created. This included a first warning with a timer set. When the timer went off, we did some breathing time. So notice it wasn't like the timer went off and then we get in the car. Like that would have triggered it. So when the timer went off, there's the transition into the breathing. We did some breathing time. An important note is we didn't start leaving talk, which seemed to be a trigger. Like, we're getting ready. We didn't do any of that. We just went straight into breathing. I am setting the timer to start breathing. And because this was something she did all the time, it wasn't a big deal. So we all started with the child already in a calm and having full capacity of those reasoning skills before we had to start leaving the house. The second thing we did was gave choices. Not the choice to go or not to go. We gave choices of, number one, shoes. So she had 3 pairs of shoes and she got to choose which shoes she wanted. 2, she got to nominate a stuffed animal. I call them stuffies. Nominate a stuffed animal who had the immense honor of car travel. And she took that one with her and showed them out the window and what was going on. And we sort of made a fun game of, stuffies don't always get to leave the house. And when they do, it's like a big field trip. So you're kind of like the teacher chaperone, the Miss Frizzle, if you will, who shows them the world. Well, all of a sudden, she had a responsibility to that stuffed animal to show it the world. And she was one of those kids that if you gave her a big job like that, she really appreciated that. So she would nominate a stuffed animal, usually based on their merit that day. And then that stuffed animal would come with her in the car. So now you've noticed that it's kind of a distraction technique. We're not even we're just getting our steps done. We're not using leaving language. She has jobs to do before we're going anywhere. And number 3, she loved to carry a purse. So we had 3 choices too, and she got to choose which purse. And I have a bunch of car games. So we just printed those out and put them in a little basket by the front door. So if you want the car games, while I'm on that note, go to therootedfamily.com, click free resources, and those are all in there. So if this is something, getting out the door is something that's difficult for you, you can print these out and just laminate them. And then just use those dry erase markers, and kids can take them in the car with them. And then I like having like 2 or 3 different ones and then switching them out. So that sort of keeps it new and fresh, like maybe switch them out every week. But that way the kids have like their job when they get in the car or something to do, which eliminates some bickering and fighting you to get in the car in the first place. And then, so 1 was the breathing. 2, we gave choices, and 3 was a game. If you know anything about me, I like to make things fun. So we installed a game that was so simple, yet so effective. It is the Who Touches the Car First game. I know. You're thinking right now, like, Erin Sadler, you are a genius. Probably not. You're probably like, oh my gosh, your game is who can touch the car first. I know. I'm telling you, but I am telling you what also. If you have a hard time getting kids in the car, who can touch the car first game is sometimes something that will get you out the door and into your life of where you need to go. So don't knock it till you've tried it. So it's very simple rules. Here's how it's played. Whoever touches the car first wins. The end. Yep. If she won, she got to put a sticker on a paper in the car. They just kept a paper in the car and she got to put a sticker on. If her parents won, they got to put one on. And the first one to get the sticker on got to pick something later in the day. Either, if she was going to watch a show, she got to watch a show, a book before bed that she wanted to read, the favorite flavor of jelly on the bread she got to pick out the jelly flavor that she's going to put on the bread they were going to get at the store. They also tallied the stickers for the week. And if the kiddo collected at least 10, she chose a date with one of her parents when they did something special together. Which I know you might be thinking like, wow, I get the pretty easy to touch the car game, but then with the stickers I'm telling you though, if you have been trapped in your house with a child that's having a 3-hour meltdown, this 1-minute sticker activity will seem like nothing to you. And I am telling you, 1 minute of your life, if it saves you from being trapped in your house, is well worth it. Or if you've been trapped in your house for 10 minutes, waiting for kids to put shoes on and having them bicker and argue, I'm telling you, if somebody's got to hustle, get their stuffy, get their shoes, and get their game, and they want to be the first one to touch the car, boom, you're out the door in 2 minutes or less. Hello. You're welcome. So just a fun game. And if you're right now saying, that's it, that's all it took to avoid 3 hours of meltdowns and huge psychiatric bills, yeah. And it's also important to note that this did not work every single time. This little girl had developed some habits, and our brains are wired to go with what we know. So there were some struggle moments in the beginning, but we calculated it worked 70% of the time from the get-go, and it got better over time. So to go from never leaving the house to this working 70% of the time, that's huge, because as it became the new normal, it increased because we were seeing her create a new habit. Pretty soon, pitching a fit was a thing of the past. As she strengthened her muscles, she needed to regulate her behavior. So 2 keys for parents. These parents were mindful and tuned into how their kiddo was feeling. And in those beginning days, they were also so in tune that they knew right away if the routine wasn't going to plan, and they developed a backup plan and a consistent set of consequences. If the child chose not to follow the plan, I had also given them my emotional awareness chart, and that's in the free resources as well. Go to therootedfamily.com to help them with communicating emotions, both with themselves and with her. The key is getting her to express her emotions through words instead of having a mountain meltdown. And then number 2, they made a deep bench of activities to swap out. So kids are kids. You can expect them to enjoy the exact same thing for the next 18 years. And what often happens is parents throw in the towel saying, oh, the system's not working, the strategy's not working. But in reality, what just needs to change is you just need to substitute something in the system, not throw out the system, just change or modify something that you're giving them in the system. So switched out the stuffed animal choice, changed the tap the car game to whoever runs around the car twice and gets in first, who can walk backwards to the car, who can crab walk, who can hop on one foot to get there first, who can name all the colors in the rainbow, who can tell a joke. You get the drift. I mean, you could keep going. Also, you can change the game in the basket. The key is making the system consistent, i.e., 3 choices in the car, boom. The 3 choices can change over time, but the system of pick 3 and go is established in the routine you want to keep. So you can change those 3 things, but the basic of 1, 2, 3 out the door. Or you might need to change it with the seasons if you live somewhere where it's snowy. Like, just grabbing shoes and going is great if you live in California and that's all you have to grab all the time. But if you have to get snow pants and all that, coats, whatever, that might be like 1 is coat, 2's hat and gloves, 3's some kind of game that you do. The key is to tune into being mindful as parents and kids. So often we see parents blaming kids, or I see parents blaming themselves. But the problem is that you are trying to row a boat with one oar and it keeps going around in circles. When you have both oars rowing in the same direction, meaning you and your kid are on the same page, then you can make some progress towards your goals. All right. Great. Thank you for joining me today. I had so much fun talking to you about you. But if you have questions, or if you have concerns, or if you want to implement this, but after listening, you still are you're unsure, 3 ways to reach out to me. Go to the website, therootedfamily.com. If you want to check out one of my courses for helping kids emotionally and socially train those brains, you might want to check out Book and Breathe. You may, if you want to click an easy button as a parent, you may want to click on our membership, and because that's going to come out in fall, and then you get all these skill building things delivered right to your inbox every month with monthly coaching from me. So you get to actually ask me these questions. You get to go and try some of these things and employ some of these brain boosters, and then we actually have a time during the month where then you get to say, this is working, this isn't working, how do I tweak this? And you get a educator, a health and wellness coach, and a brain health coach all at your fingertips. And I know when you have those great resources, but sometimes when you're looking at books and websites and everything else, it can be overwhelming. So to have somebody there who's just, I just need to ask this person because I know they have the knowledge and they've looked at the brain research of how this can help my kid at your fingertips, it's super helpful. And that way you don't have to spend hours deep diving in a Google search or, deep diving down some parenting website, and then you read the whole thing and you're like, yeah, but I don't really know how to apply that to my life. I read it. It sounds amazing. I can't tell you how many times I run into parents who are like, I read that book. It was amazing. And then I tried to use it in my own home and it didn't work. So that's just a thought with, I like to do the coaching, the parent coaching, and help kids all at the same time. And I do that through my membership site. Again, that's at therootedfamily.com. If you want to have me come speak or do a workshop, I would love to do that. And if you have a group of people too, and you want to get them together and have me come on over, I also usually bring a little deal for your group to do the membership course too. So, and as always, I have all the free resources. So we went over some of them in there already. The card games we talked about. And also I will have the schedule for modifying those triggers, those 5 steps. So in case you didn't have a pencil by you right there, no worries. I'll have them all for you in the free resources. So just head on over to the free resources at therootedfamily.com and print out whatever you need, and you'll find a lot of other good stuff there too. All right, you guys, peace, love, and roots. You guys go boost those brains.